What if the most frightening consequence of fame is not public backlash, not cancelled projects, but the quiet moment when success no longer feels safe? In recent months, a series of images, silences, and subtle shifts surrounding several well-known Chinese celebrities have sparked intense discussion online, not because of confirmed scandals, but because of a shared emotional pattern that many viewers find deeply unsettling. Tonight, we are not here to judge. We are here to observe, reflect, and understand what happens when choices made under the spotlight begin to echo back, slowly, quietly, and persistently. At first glance, everything appears unchanged. The images remain polished, the settings refined, the smiles carefully composed. Yet for many observers, it is precisely this consistency that raises quiet questions. When public life continues flawlessly, while private narratives fall silent, attention inevitably shifts from what is shown to what is withheld. In psychological terms, sustained outward composure during periods of heightened scrutiny often signals internal negotiation. Rather than retreat, the individual moves forward deliberately, reinforcing normality as a form of stability. This is not denial, but containment, a way of maintaining control when certainty is no longer guaranteed. What draws the public's attention is not extravagance itself, but timing. Moments that once read as carefree now feel deliberate, almost purposeful. Each appearance seems to carry an unspoken message that balance still exists, that order has not been lost. Yet emotional resilience under pressure is rarely effortless. It demands constant self-regulation, careful presentation, and an ongoing awareness of how every gesture might be interpreted. In this sense, the pressure does not erupt. It settles. It becomes part of daily life, quietly shaping behavior. Here, consequence is not spectacle. It is endurance. And endurance, while admirable, often comes at the cost of emotional rest. There is a common assumption that access to influence, support, or material security naturally leads to resolution. In reality, such resources often delay emotional reckoning rather than eliminate it. They soften impact, but they do not dissolve responsibility. When solutions are consistently externalized, inner conflict can remain unresolved. Over time, this creates a paradox. The more control one appears to possess, the harder it becomes to feel genuinely secure. Decisions are managed, outcomes negotiated, but peace remains conditional. This is where the idea of karma quietly enters public discussion, not as mysticism, but as metaphor. It describes the moment when unresolved choices begin to echo internally, even when circumstances remain favorable. Restlessness replaces confidence. Vigilance replaces ease. Psychologically, this state is demanding. It requires constant anticipation, continual adjustment, and the persistent sense that stability must be defended rather than enjoyed. Nothing visibly collapses, yet nothing fully settles. The audience responds to this not with condemnation, but recognition. Many understand that true consequence is rarely immediate or dramatic. More often, it is prolonged awareness, the knowledge that comfort has limits, and that not every imbalance can be corrected from the outside. Unlike narratives driven by excess or visibility, this story is shaped by restraint. Movements appear measured, statements are minimal, presence itself feels conditional. What emerges is not withdrawal, but careful positioning, a mode of existence built around continuity rather than expansion. This pattern reflects what psychologists often describe as survival orientation. When one's sense of security feels uncertain, preservation becomes priority. Progress is paused, not abandoned, but deferred until conditions feel safer. From the outside, this may look like composure. Internally, however, it often requires sustained emotional labor. Every interaction is assessed. every decision weighed not for potential gain, but for risk. Over time, this vigilance becomes exhausting. The public does not respond with shock here, but with unease. There's something quietly unsettling about a life lived entirely in calculation, not because it is wrong, but because it is heavy. This is not a story of downfall. It is a story of persistence under constraint. And persistence, when prolonged, carries its own cost. The gradual narrowing of emotional space, where survival is achieved, but freedom feels increasingly distant. The image itself was abstract. Dark tones, suspended forms, deliberate distance between object and observer. In another context, it might have passed as purely conceptual. Yet timing transformed perception. In moments of collective sensitivity, symbolism acquires weight. Viewers project emotion onto imagery, reading meaning not only from composition, but from surrounding atmosphere. What might once have felt experimental now felt unsettling to some, simply because the audience was already alert. Importantly, this reaction says less about intention and more about emotional climate. Art does not exist in isolation. It absorbs the mood of its moment, becoming a surface onto which broader anxieties are reflected. For some, the image represented creative expression. For others, it stirred discomfort, not fear, but unease, a sense that beauty and solemnity had intersected in a way that felt unresolved. This response illustrates how public figures often become emotional reference points during uncertain times. Their work is no longer received neutrally. It is filtered through collective feeling. In this sense, controversy is not accusation, but resonance, a reminder that interpretation is shaped as much by the viewer as by the artist. Across these narratives, a shared pattern emerges. There is no sudden collapse, no definitive judgment, no final act. Instead, consequence unfolds quietly through sustained emotional pressure and heightened self-awareness. What connects these stories is not wrongdoing, but weight. The weight of choices made under visibility. The weight of being observed without being fully understood. The weight of carrying outcomes that cannot be publicly addressed. This is why audiences frame these discussions in the language of karma, not as punishment, but as process, a gradual reckoning that operates internally rather than externally, shaping behavior long after headlines fade. Crucially, this framework avoids condemnation. It does not seek to assign guilt. Instead, it invites reflection on accountability, on timing, on the unseen cost of maintaining composure under scrutiny. For viewers, the resonance lies in familiarity. Few lives are free from consequence. Most people recognize the experience of living with decisions that cannot be undone, only integrated. In the end, these stories endure because they do not shout. They linger. And in that quiet persistence, they ask a universal question. What does it truly mean to move forward when the past still speaks? Fame amplifies everything. Success, scrutiny, and silence. And sometimes what returns is not public judgment, but a private reckoning. For the audience, these stories resonate not because they are sensational, but because they mirror something universal, the truth that every choice leaves a trace, and not all consequences arrive loudly. Thank you for spending your time with Update X Ufemreoi. If you appreciate thoughtful storytelling that looks beyond headlines and explores the deeper emotional layers behind celebrity news, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support allows us to continue delivering calm, respectful, and insightful updates every day. Don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay with Update X 24H, where stories don't just happen, they are understood.